Today we have Mr. Vishal Shah of Gleets Consultancy. Mr. Vishal Shah holds a degree in Masters of Building Construction from University of Florida and a Bachelor's of Civil Engineering from University of Pune with other industry qualifications such as MRICS, CCE, and IGBC, AP, and is good at various software platforms such as Econex, Constructware, eBuilder, Prolog, Primavera, Microsoft Projects, Timberline, Costex, etc. He is an alumnus of Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore IIMB, having worked with clients across various sectors and have assisted in delivery of more than 100 million square foot of construction work. Vishal has developed strong focus on developing bespoke commercial management systems, control procedures, and implementations. With a track record of leading multiple teams who are in forefront of delivering value-added services in cost estimation, cost planning, procurement, and contract administration. Vishal's strong focus on sustainability, value management, along with his enterprise in feasibility and concept stage cost advices has been instrumental in developing benchmark studies, market trends, and cost forecasting tools. We are very honored to have you here, Mr. Vishal. Uh, Dear participants, let us make use of his expertise. Let us hear from him. Mr. Vishal, please.
Good evening, everyone, and sorry for this glitch. Right. So, first of all, I thank Construction Philosophy to allow me to share my experience and knowledge. Uh, as a cost manager by profession, my belief is the cost should always inform the design. So, design can take the right decisions and right options so that the budget which is established by the client is met and optimized. So the cost manager's role should always be a supporting role to the design. We don't want the designers to not to experiment. We want them to experiment. We want them to create great structures. However, at the same time, we want to make sure the budget which is established by client is proper. Yeah. So in cost management, there are basically two major aspects. One is a pre-contract and one is post-contract. So in the pre-contract, basically we talk about anything from initial design stage till the award of the contracts. So which also includes various cost estimates. It includes escalation, contingency, value engineering and management, with Kashi sir has already started explaining you since last couple of sessions. We also talk about benchmarking. How do we make sure the project is optimized and done properly? And then we go to the procurement route, which way to procure the contract, what should be the tendering process, how do you evaluate the contracts. So these are the major aspect of pre-contract cost plan. And when we go to the post-contract, which Sini will take over in her sessions, it's basically after the award of the contract, what happens? How do you manage the cost management on site? How do you measure things? And how do we ensure the project is kept budget within the allocated numbers during the post contract? She will also touch base on the claim management part of it, right? So we have two sessions on pre-contract. So today we're gonna talk about the green part of it, which basically talks from the development cost of the project to the benchmarking. And tomorrow we'll talk about the procurement routes till the contract, right? Okay. So just to base a little bit more about my experience and knowledge, and the reason why I want to share with you is, uh, if you have a various kind of asset class or various kind of buildings, if you have your experience on, that gives you a whole new horizon about what works on one kind of project and what does not, and how does cost differ from one to another. I've been fortunate enough to be part of various projects which has allowed me to work and understand why the cost really varies. Yeah. Right. So, all right. Which project is this? Does anyone know this? You can unmute yourself and talk. It's fine. I like to keep this interactive as much as possible.
Burj
Burj
Khalifa.
Burj
Burj
Khalifa.
Khalifa. Right. Correct. Which project is this? All right. So this is
Mumbai,
Mumbai.
Mumbai.
Mumbai
Mumbai
International
Airport. Correct. This is Mumbai new Mumbai, airport, which has been commissioned last 5 years. This is an upcoming project, so I wouldn't ask you to guys to name. This is one of India's largest interconnected building. This is coming up in Surat. It's called Surat Diamond Bourse.
Diamond City.
Yes, it's part of Dream City. It's roughly
Surat
about
Diamond City.
correct. It's a 7 million square feet, a built-up connected building. The campus over here, what you see is a Godrej. It's a Godrej Vikhroli campus. Again, a massive development where we have two commercial buildings. We have completely mixed use, a hotel and a residential component. So again, huge part of the project. And some of you who would have been in Mumbai probably could have seen this on the skyline. This has been stuck for a very long time, but now it has started off and hopefully will finish up in a year. This is called Kohinoor Square, which is in Dadar, central Mumbai. So what is common in all this? The common is cost managers. All these are mega projects where the client will go wrong if they don't have control on project cost. There are various kind of partners in the project, and QS or cost manager is one of the important partner to make sure the client is managing the project within the budget, right? So what is quantity surveying? What exactly are we talking about? So it basically talks about anything to manage and estimate the construction cost. We have to work out the estimate from the start and control it during the cycle. Who would be the guys who would be interested in QS? So someone, and you should be someone who should like the numbers. You don't want your day 9 to 5 jobs, because quantity survey is not gonna be easy task. It's gonna be always be different. There are always so many parameters which will come in, which will touch base on, and then you will have like simulating discussion with the project participants. With good foundation in IT and ability to learn in a fast track environment, if you have this, you will be a successful QS. Traditionally, if you see, the cost managers or quantity surveyor used to be someone who would measure, who would prepare estimates, who would prepare the tender document, release it, and make sure that it is correct. But now in today's scenario, I think that skill set is no longer enough. You need to have a background, agreed, but you need to do something more than that, because projects what we see now are far more complex. They are very dynamic. The clients keep on requesting for different options, and they would need to make decisions fast because of all the finance cost and all the overheads what they are incurring. The technology what we see in today's world is completely different. I mean, today we are talking about precast, we are talking about BIM, we are talking about Costex, we are talking about modular construction approaches, modern methods of construction, which was not there earlier. And client obviously would like to see what's the best option, right? Claims. Earlier, when you see, the contracts were there in India, but it was more about interpersonal relationship. But now claim management is getting into it. Claim management is one of the most important tasks which cost managers need to take care in their engagement with the project. And obviously, when we make a decision, we need to make sure that the life cycle costings are correct. So we don't want to make a decision for today, but we want to make it for the longer duration, 20 years, 30 years, what happens on that project, so that you make the right decision. And if you see now, the procurement methods has completely changed. Earlier, there used to be master builder who would provide you based on the material, and then you will, material you will buy, and he will do all the labor work, but it's no longer there. Now things have changed into alliance contract, or they are talking about, say, integrated project deliveries, or they're talking about design and builds. So there are again various aspects which obviously will touch base during the course. But there are many of this aspect which a quantity surveyor is expected to know and expected to guide the client, right? So this is what the budding QSs and the professionals need to understand, that we are no longer the guys who would do the measurements. We are no longer the guys who will certify the bills. Yes, it's part of our job, but our more an important job is to make sure that the client has the right information to make their decisions. There are various asset class and various kind of structures, where you will have the residential to warehousing to data centers to commercial buildings to retail malls or hotel. There are various, and one really needs to understand each project typology to to see where the cost would be. How do you make sure the project is rightly done with the right and optimized cost, right? When you look at the cost aspect, there are various type of cost. There is a land cost, there is FSI or a TDR, what we call in Mumbai, and FAR, what we call in other parts of the world. The building and site improvement, the interior fit out cost, then the approval cost to get the permissions. Then we need the money, so pre-opening cost, working capitals. We need all the consultants on board. We need to make sure the finances is taken care properly, and the client's own development overheads. So all this is part of my construction development, project development cost. The QSs, if you are working with client, then you have feasibility and understanding of all this aspect. If you are working with contractor, then you are basically talking about post-contract or a design build kind of proposal. But when you work as a consultant, you probably have understanding of both the aspect almost simultaneously, because at times client would share all this information, most of it, to make sure that the feasibility numbers what we are providing is correct, right? So just going back into detail of all this development cost, right? So when you talk about the stamp duty registration, this is just to give you a flavor that when we talk about land, it's just not the land. There are other aspects which is associated with that, which you need to consider and think about when you're putting the numbers together. So it is just not land, but the registration cost, the taxes, the legal or tech due diligence what the client would need to take, the market research for feasibility, the brokerage what we need to pay, and the approval cost. So all this is part of my land and approval bucket as such, which I need to consider. So when you look at the site and the building improvement, now at times you need to go with piling, or at times you need to go with the raft foundations, or you need to do temporary works to make sure the work happens, like diagram walls, and the different type of structures, the IT cost and all the, especially in type of malls, tenant improvement comes in. Like, what you are providing, obviously the structure and common area, but in some of the larger spaces, you'll do some improvement for the tenants who will come in. So you need to allocate money towards that, right? Then you need to look at the operational cost in terms of OPEX of, first fit, or what we call it for the hotels. Then you need to give, like, 3 set of, say, spoons, or 5 sets of, say, plates. That's also is part of your development cost, because without that, the project does not start. When you launch the project, there is a marketing cost, there's a parties you probably need to throw, and also you need to make sure that all the snags are closed out. So that all this are various aspects of development cost, which one really needs to understand before we put down the final numbers together, right? There are risks which you need to cover. So for example, Forex, that's a risk which you need to cover. There are internal cost and internal risk cost which you need to carry. The insurances you need to purchase, right? So all this is part of my development cost. So when I look at the overall project cost, I need to look at all this aspect before I start putting down my numbers. How do we take care of this process, the whole process of cost management? So there are various ways AAC has done, or even RICS has done, or RIBA has done. So there are various stages what they call. So the typical and standard terminology in the industry is feasibility stage estimates, concept, schematic, and DD. These are the four major stages where the design starts getting developed, and you use that data, you use this time to fine tune your design and make sure the project is proper, right? So all your stages when you do, at each stage you need to provide a cost estimate or cost plan, and which needs to be tallied up with the client's internal sign off that okay, this is the project. For example, I was part of a project in Trivandrum where we did a hotel, Taj, and look, I have X amount of money. I cannot spend beyond that because it's not, I cannot provide anything beyond that. So the cost manager's role is to make sure that it happens before that, right? So these are the various uh, stages. We'll go in detail as well for this. And during this process, we need to carry out value management. We need to carry out risk management. We need to carry out options engineering. We need to look at what's best and life cycle costing around it, the whole life cycle cost. So all this needs to be done during this phases, right? All right. So when do we really start cost planning? Cost planning can be started as soon as you have a cost planner engaged by owner uh, is on board. At times you are, the cost manager is on board before designers. I mean, because client want to know that okay, this is a piece of land. This is the kind of project I want. Can you tell me what is my cost? Whether I can afford this or not, right? They might have concept or they might have a sort of a benchmark project. Okay, this is a project I like. What can be done in this area, this price, and tell me whether it works or not. So the cost manager provides them an initial feasibility cost estimate. This budget, if signed off, then it needs to be monitored during the design and construction phase by cost planner who will advise the client at various stages. The cost planning allows us to do the feasibility of the project, right? And as I said, the cash flow of the project. Again, through the cost planning, I would be able to provide the cash flow so client can understand by when they need money, how much money they need, so they can be ready with the funding available. Why do we need to do cost plans? Cost plans need to be done just not on back of the envelope calculation. It has to be done in scientific manner in a required process because the professionals what client hire is expected to have in-depth knowledge of the local market rates, the processes, the contractors, to understand that what can be done. Can we go with two basement? Can we go with single basement? Can we do podiums? Can we change the facade type? Can we go with precast construction? All that is expected to know, right? And as a cost manager, you are expected to identify the risk on the project. So before spending too much time and money, the client would appreciate if you tell them, okay, these are the project risks, and this is what needs to be mitigated. Otherwise, you will have a project, and the project will have a problem, right? So these are the reasons for doing the cost plan. Now, the place where the cost managers can add value, and Mutaya Kasi sir would agree to this, is at the front end. The professionals can add up and they can influence the project at the initial stage during the planning, during the detailed design, before detailed design. Because after detailed design and at construction, we are just trying to control it. The cost of change will go up and it does not make any financial sense to do it. The project is actually lost. So opportunity to do anything what we do in terms of optimization is at the initial stage. And that is what needs to be done during the cost, through the cost plans to identify those issues, inform to the client and the design team that this is where the problems are, this is where we are going overboard. Can we look at this and can we optimize this? The various type of cost plans, if you see AAC, so AAC has done it based on different classes, class 1 to class 5. And they have also provided a rough, a range of accuracy based on their understanding, based on the standards what they adopt. So at budget level or at DD level or as a concept level, what sort of estimates are required. However, what happens in reality is the clients are expecting the cost managers to provide a very close numbers plus or minus 15% at the feasibility stage. They want to make sure that the cost managers they hire, or internal or external, has that kind of accuracy levels or understanding of the market, so that you are in the right ballpark, because that is where what the major decision needs to be taken place. So these are the stages. However, when you look in India, so we carry out order of magnitude cost plans, concept stage cost plan, schematic, DD, and tender stages. And all this cost plans happens the, along with the design. So the time what you will have available to carry out your study is often in conflict with the design program. So cost manager is expected to work along with the design team as much as possible and try to provide the numbers so that the design decisions can be taken place. Yeah, right. So how do we do the cost plans? What's the process? The process of cost plan is, before we start the cost planning, we need to understand what is the basis of the contract. How the project is going to go. What is the project schedule? What level of designs we have, what sort of information we have, what is the scope of work, what is the battery limit for the project, what can be done, how would client want that estimates to come by, what kind of formats. And obviously we need to generate basis of estimates, we have to generate the risk registers, as well as we have to register the cost report, which has the amalgamation of everything what we have done for the project. Right. So these are just to show you the gates of the project, on whether at each stage it should be there, yes or no, or it goes back. So this is just to give you indication about a simple flow chart which talks about that. Right. Before we start on the key cost driver, so when just want to mention over here. So when you look at the project, right, look at the project from the sense of how this project look like, where is the project is going to be positioned, what are the abnormals for this project, what is different over here compared to other projects, and try to walk the project in your mind before you start doing the cost plan. This will help you to formulate your questions, formulate your thought process, so that your estimates become more and more robust. One of the worst thing what we have seen in industry is starting the project on a wrong estimate, because when you do a wrong estimate, the whole project will suffer till the end, because that number is never achievable. You cannot meet the target, and there is always a struggle for each and everything in terms of procurement, or in terms of designs or selection of alternates. Everywhere you'll have that trouble. So that is where what we need to think about. Yeah. Before we get into the key cost driver in more detail, if anyone has any questions, do feel free to stop me at any point of time and raise any questions. I'll be happy to answer that. All right. So for any project and any cost plans or any cost estimates, we start with what is this project all about? Whether are we targeting to a low cost housing, mid scale housing, or is it luxury? What kind of hotel it is? It's a 5-star, 4-star, or what kind of commercial building it is? It is a grade A building, grade B building. So based on that, we understand where the position is. So our mind gets fine-tuned with the type of structure or the finishes or type of contractor to expect for this kind of project. The cost also differs quite a bit on who is the promoter. If you have the local city-based owner, which have a different cost. If you have someone from outside, because he would like to reduce his risk, and he will go with someone who is maybe more expensive, but reduce risk for him. So again, based on that, you need to understand where the project is going to be pitched at, and who's doing it. And based on that, the project standard gets defined. You also need to look at the type of no, ground conditions, for example. As I said earlier, pile versus raft versus standalone foundations, or uh, any other regular kind of issues. Or what are the locations? For example, if you're doing something in Mumbai versus doing something in Kolkata versus doing something in Kochi, it has impact on labor cost, it has impact on material cost, it has impact on the transportation cost for the material which is not available to you in your city, or the cost towards imports, whether it's a metro or a non-metro location. The contractor's preliminary cost, the way contractor calculates this overhead, it's called preliminary cost. So that preliminary cost would vary based on project to project, based on locations, based on the typology. So that also we need to consider. We also need to consider the building shape and size. I mean, I have seen projects where you know the components. So let's take an example right here. Let's take an example of a residential area. So in the residential complex, if you have a much larger common areas, the corridors which are much larger, the cost of that is actually loaded on the building sellable price, correct? Because that's how the areas are getting distributed. So the more of that common area will need to be loaded up. So if your area matrix is not correct, then you will be ending up with a higher ticket price, cost per 2 bedroom or 3 bedroom or whatever. We also need to see, like I said, let's take a hotel as example. So in that, front of the house versus back of the house, the components of that, how the parking requirements changes. For example, when if you look in Pune right now, in Pune's market, Pune has one of the largest requirement of parking as per the bylaws, which is very different from what we do in Bangalore or Hyderabad. So that means my substructure cost or my parking cost will go up if I'm doing in Pune, right? Because my sellable area still remains same. I'm doing similar, but my parking area will require addition. It will also require, based on the mixed use project or based on standalones, the sharing of the common utilities, the sharing of the spans will change. If you are going with a retail with 11 by 11 grid versus a residential with 9 by 9 grid, it will has a different structural components. The methodology of construction would change. For example, I would have a Maivan or aluminum formwork in residential, while in commercial, I may not need to do that because I will require a PTA there. So in PT, I will not use that, right? So these are some of the factors, again, you need to look at. From design perspective, you need to look at what is the earthquake zoning in that particular area. What kind of framing option are we looking at? Are we looking at concrete? Are we looking at composite? Are we looking at steel? Are we looking at any special fire protection norms? No, the fire protection would change based on if you're doing a structural steel, you need to provide a 2 hours fire rating, which is typically we don't do because we always construct in concrete, and concrete already has enough fire rating. But if you're doing it with a steel building, you need to add up all that aspect. And again, the typology of that fire protection, whether you go with uh, a regular vermiculite, right, or you can go with a fire paint. Fire paint obviously is more expensive, but aesthetically good. It also depends on the type of structure. The type of structure in terms of building height. When you are doing a super tall structure, we're looking at uh, a G+4 or G+5 structure. The how we take care of parking requirements within the building. Are we going with 2 basement? Are we going with additional basement? Or are we going with multi-level car parks? Or are we going a robotic car park? All depends on the building geometry, on the plant requirements and how they want to do that, and the future aspirations of the particular area. Yeah. So based on that, again, there are cost drivers. One of the study what we have found, when the cost managers look at, is the ratios. The ratios, there are various ratios. The ratios of built up areas, parking to built up or that. But another key area is the facade. So in facade, the more squarer the building, right? More squarer the building, it's a better in terms of facade cost. And you also have rectangular projects where you have obviously larger kind of larger lengths for the facade. So if you see this example here, for a similar kind of areas, right, of 168 girth, but the floor plate area changed from 68 to 16 or 44 to, your elevation factor reduces. The, the lesser the elevation ratio, facade is more optimized. And especially when you look at the tall towers, right? In tall towers, the wind pressure creates a huge effect. So you need to make sure that the design which is done is proper in terms of wind pressure and how you're breaking down that wind, right? So that is some of the again cost drivers we need to consider and think about. So as I said, the area configurations earlier. Now, there are many projects what we have seen at times, where the areas are not correct, not correctly done. The room versus FOH versus BOH. Obviously, everyone wants to reduce the back of the house as much as possible, right? But what happens is the FOH area. FOH is front of the house, which is basically your lobbies, your kitchen, your restaurants, your banqueting areas, and all that. If that is higher compared to your other benchmark projects, obviously your cost is gonna go up over here because you are putting everything on cost per key basis, because that's one of the standards what hotel industry looks for. That okay, my standard hotel of say 5-star hotel, can it be done in 85 lakhs a key? And because the areas are different, right? The cost per key shifts, and the people, and especially on the owner, will start questioning why my costs are high over here. The way to explain to the client is to a detailed area statement and show the difference in the areas and show the examples of why the cost have gone up, while the per key is not getting added, but the cost is increasing, right? The other area configuration in all different asset class, you can take a look, in like for example in warehouse, the amount of cold room space or office space, in restaurants, in hotel, like how many number of restaurants, what kind of display kitchens you have there, or what if you have a signature kitchen over there. So all that again will change our cost. Our cost plan needs to consider all these aspects before we submit to the client, right? Look, coming to the building services side of it, right? uh, if you're doing a project, for example, in Kochi, right, you may not need a heating. But if you're doing a project in, say, Ladakh, or if you're doing something in, say, Amritsar, you need a heating system as well. At times, the cost managers would not take that, or at the initial stage, people don't consider this kind of cost. But we need to consider all that when we work it out. The power backup requirement, the DG said, whether it's 100% DG or 50% DG or only for emergency load, will have a difference. We also need to look at the type of IT systems. The BMS systems needs to be incorporated as part of the overall building. In one of my projects, I had to bring power about from 7 kilometers. Per kilometer, I had to spend about 50 lakh rupees, right? This was not there as part of my cost plan, right? So we need to consider this cost when we do the initial budget. And okay, where exactly is the power? Is a substation nearby? Do we have the required availability over here? If not, then we need to allocate the funds against that. Again, when we look at the interior finishes, what kind of interior finishes we want. Interior finishes, we can try to focus and put it more towards to budget, but obviously it has to be as per the form available. The recommended makes and alternate has to be within the numbers what we have given, right? Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to manage, and you need to keep on looking for different procurement options to bring down your cost. Right? Other cost drivers are your project schedule. For a smaller project, if you go with a larger project schedule because of the phasing requirement, For example, obviously your cost will go up because the contractor has to contain and maintain all the preliminary costs within that, right? And if your project goes beyond the agreed timeline, then you have to add all other overheads. There could be contractors' claims, there could be forex fluctuations, and all that is part of your cost. Another important thing you need to look at is how you calculate a late revenue. Because if my project was supposed to complete in 36 months, if it takes in 48 months, that means I've lost my 12 months of revenue. That's actually my project cost. And that's going to make my feasibility look bad, right? So you need to look for options which you can finish up the project faster and better so that all these aspects are being taken care of, right? Other things you need to look at is the taxations. For example, what are the GST rates? In affordable, for example, we have like 12%. In others, we have 18%. In some places, we have GST credits as well in the running expenses. Like in a mall, I can buy furniture and equipments and I can get a credit for that, right? So how do we take care of that? How do I take that money back in my kitty so that my client gets, a better feasibility for the project? We need to consider import tax. If your project is located in special economic zones or ITS kind of project, then you need to have the cost benefit for the taxation. So all that you need to consider as part of your initial thought process in putting your budget and numbers together. Yeah. Another thing what always surprises me is the site development cost. The site development cost is a direct derivative of the area available for the site, to beautify the site, the road, the lengths, and all. If I had a site which was about say 50 acres, which was an industrial park. However, and client had gone with, okay, 3,000 rupees a square foot is more than enough for me, and I'll carry that budget. But when we started doing the initial budget, when we got appointed, we realized that client is only looking at the building cost, but infrastructure cost he has not taken enough adequate numbers, and that is where we had a major problem, because infrastructure cost to develop the whole 50-acre site in today, with all the roads and the demarcations to be done, all is a front and day one cost. So all that cost needs to be really considered. Sometimes client would like to beautify the podiums or the terraces, or activate the terrace as they call it. All that cost needs to be taken. It's not on a cost per square feet, because all your other benchmark costs what you take, and okay, I've done it 3,000, I've done 2,500. All this does not have that. And when we talk, when we go into benchmarking, we'll touch up base on that. Basically, what happens is that client will have a large wish list, right? And it is our duty to explain that, okay, this is what this project has, and these are the add-ons, what we call as a waterfall analysis, which will share again in the upcoming slide. So this kind of information needs to be provided, but you can provide it when you consider it. So when you look at the project, look at all this aspect before you put down the numbers. Ask questions to yourself that, okay, this is what is happening. What should I do here, right? Again, when you look at the type of procurement, how are you gonna procure everything? Whether it's it's a labor contract, or it's a material plus labor contract, it's a grade A contractor, grade B contractor, it's international contractor, it's a composite building. How am I doing this? Okay, I have another 5 projects. Can I do a bulk purchase? Can I use reverse auction technologies? So all that again you can work out along with the client during when you start detailing out your design cost plans, concept to DD. Yeah. So the type of procurement affects us. It affects on various aspects, right? And we need to fine tune this procurement way or method at the initial stage itself, right? At the time when you do your initial cost plan at the concept, this should be at least more or less agreed with the client. So obviously there are various aspects, and it depends on the risk appetite of the client, what the market condition, what do we have enough contractors over there, or for example, if we're doing a project in Maldives, there are very limited vendors who are able to do it. And sometimes you will probably need to get people from Sri Lanka to do that project. And that is a different way or different costing for those guys, right? So you need to understand all this when we are looking at the initial cost plan, because otherwise, as I said, if your initial cost plan is wrong, you will get in trouble along the way, right? So design bid build or a main contractor or DNB or alliance. So again, every of this procurement route has a different cost parameters. It has an additional cost, right? So if I'm asking someone to do a design build, the risk will for the contractor will go up. So it's not going to be the same price as my design bid build. There will be a difference. If I'm asking a civil contractor to coordinate all other contractors, that means I have to pay him some additional cost towards nomination. I need to consider that as a part of my project budget. Or if I'm doing an alliance contract or an IPD, in that there's a different way of calculation. It could be a cost plus as well, right? So that means the client needs to carry higher amount of risk because it's a cost plus with the targeted GMP price, right? So it will have a different methods, and you can obviously play around with different ways, mix and match, depending on what is suitable for the project. You also need to agree with the client on what sort of template you want to provide. There are various templates. There is forms from RIBA, Royal Institute of British Architects. RICS has templates. Sini, as she mentioned on that day, that she and her team has worked out on international standard of measurements, and there are Indian IS code based as well. So you need to agree and understand with the client what sort of template they want, because it becomes very tedious and difficult task if if you prepare a cost plan and the client would say, okay, I don't like this format, can you change in different format? Because that means rework. That means you could even miss out in something, and it's not the right way to approach because the deadline will be missed, right? So the template, you need to agree with the client. Typically what we do is we would like to have the basement cost separately. So that's the substructure and basic civil cost. We'd like to keep it separately, and superstructure we keep it separate. And superstructure will have all of the superstructure costs along with that, right? So external facade or apart. I mean, this was a residential template, so the common area for that as apartment interiors. So agree with the client what you need to do. Any questions till now? All right, moving on. Right. So when you do a estimate, when you do the estimates, you need to make sure that your project budget has escalation and contingency, and which is adequate contingency escalation. So if you know the market, if you see the crude price which went down drastically, or if you see the US dollar which has increased drastically, uncertain labor. I mean, forget about COVID as a situation, but in general, when you see the labor are becoming less and less, the price of labor is getting going more and more. It's increasing quite a bit, uh, and then obviously we are looking at any other escalation which happens as part of the overall project life cycle, 2 years, 3 years period, 5 years period. How do we take care of that when we include in our cost plan or even in tender, right? So just breaking it down in a different way here, right? So typically as a cost manager, I would like to have three type of contingencies. One, I would put it for my design. So anything from what I've assumed from the design, which is getting changed. So for example, if I'm consider a semi-unitized system for facade glazing, if that changes to a full unitized system, there is a cost impact. That decisions I do not know right now. It could happen in the future. However, how do I control that, right? So that is a bucket or a amount which is available to the architect or the design team that, okay, in case if this happens, then my cost contingency will have this much allowance I have. So I have a design contingency, then I have a construction contingency. So The unknowns at site, especially when you start digging the project, the foundations or the basement, you will encounter a different strata than what you assume. You in Bombay or in western part, you typically come with issue of soft rock versus hard rock, or there are issues related to the neighbor buildings where you need to do a shore pile properly to protect the structures. Or when you start the excavation, you might come with old RCC foundations, right? So again, all that are unknowns which you have no control on. There could be a huge dewatering requirements on site. You need to carry a contingency towards it to make sure it should be adequate. It should not be too high and too low. It should be adequate contingency to cover this kind of risk. And then you'll have a management contingency, which basically a client will decide, okay, I want to spend extra on artwork. I want to spend extra on signage because I want my building to look good. Right? So that's a management contingency. That's a reserve which client will have. But these are the contingencies which you definitely should have in your project when you plan it. Obviously, it does not take care of any abnormals like the abnormals in terms of like COVID-19, right? It's abnormal. No one can have that cost covered, right? Or any kind of a major war kind of situation. So where the escalation and currency effect will have a major effect. But whatever we know, we should price as per normal. The other way is, how do you take care of these contingencies? What we typically do is we break down the project into various elements, and these various elements we try to provide the value that okay, in this project this looks dicey, it does not have enough drawings, the risk is higher, let's go with higher contingency amounts. Don't go and agree a flat percentage, 3%, 5%, or 7%, whatever. Don't go on that basis. Always try to break down that okay, on which element there's a higher risk, which element there's a lesser risk, and based on that you work out the package contingency. So for example, in this case I've broken down to the ratios of 3, 5s and 7s, and I've worked out, right? You could have a different approach as well. You could put it down based on a risk analysis, which will will come in the next few slides. You can even provide based on that. So again, based on that, your contingency value should come. So that the anyone who's looking into it will be able to tell, yeah, it looks fine, or yes, there could be a potential issue here, and can go with higher contingency or lower contingency. Yeah. Another aspect what we come across is escalation. Uh, Unfortunately, in India, we do not have a right tender index pricing. Uh, we used to have one from CIDC, which is they used to publish till 2019, but now they have stopped after GST. And uh, CPWD is not really used properly for the private sector. So you need to work out your escalation. Uh, there are ways to do it. Gleeds have done their own. I will not bank on that. In terms, I will talk more about that. But there are ways to work on an escalation. You need to consider as part of your overall project, right? So the way we do it is we do it based on a cash flow. So we break down the whole package based on the project schedule, on which quarter I'll need which amount, and based on that I work out my quarter to quarter escalation and provide a number. The one of the best method what you can do internally is look at your historical project, look at the historical purchasing data, how much you have purchased or acquired, say concrete or steel or labor or like shuttering material, and what you are pricing now. That will give you a fair idea about where how much escalation is generally jumped up. Obviously, concrete and steel has cycles; it will vary. So you need to have at least a couple of projects in different vicinity to make sure that you are carrying the right numbers, right? Your cement price fluctuates a lot, and because of the situation what we have in India, cement price is not stable, and steel is directly dependent on the global trade and issues, right? So you need to take care in at least 5 years. Last 5 years takes few projects, 2, 3, 4 projects, work out the ratio, and then based on that you work out your escalation. Don't again agree on based on CPWT or a WPI, because again that's a mixed basket. This is not reflecting of your project and your project issues. For example, if you have a project which is completely glazed, which your cost for aluminum and cost of glass will impact your facade quite a bit, right? But if you are using WPI CPI, it will have a lower percentage of that impact inbuilt in the overall index. So that means you are factoring lower amount of escalation, right? So that is something you need to consider and think about when you're putting the escalation numbers together. Other way for the contingency, as we were talking about, is the risk register. You the better way is you list down all the risk, what you think for the project is, right? You put RAG analysis, which is red, amber, green, and provide the value for that. For example, right, you are doing currently at a concept stage, but at concept stage you do not have the foundation design. If I need to add additional piles, I can put out a rough cost of piles, and those pile cost I can add up, and I can put as it's a high or a red, amber, or green, and I can put a probability ratio that it looks like 20% ratio, 30% that it will come. Those kind of different aspects you can consider as part of your project risk, project schedule. You can put in that way, whether it can be finished in 24 months as client is asking for or not, or the procurement or the market sentiments or the finishing level may change because it's a long 3-year or 5-year program, and finishing standards will change, and the designer will have a new requirements coming in, or the operator in case of hotel will have a different requirement. You can put those costs and take a percentage out of that. Okay, these are all the risks. I'm carrying say 10% of that as my cost, as part of my contingency. That's another way of looking at it. How do you put your contingencies together, right? You also need to make sure that you have a checklist available when you prepare a cost plan. So this is a standard one what we typically use, and there are various aspects. So for example, if the scale is correct, do we have a schedule? Is there a phasing requirement? Do you have a geotech report? Or what is the ground condition? What kind of backfilling we have? Do we need to bring for outside, or can we use the existing one? Do we have the ratios available, right? Do we have double glazed or do we have single glazed? What kind of facade cleaning system we want? Is there any, like say, helipad coming anywhere in the building, right? So all these are the checklist what you can prepare internally when you look at the project. Write down the question. It won't take you more than probably an hour. If you're been working in the cost management domain, it won't take you more than an hour to write down the major points what you need to look at. So work on this checklist and then start ticking it out. Okay, I've checked this. This is done. This is done. For example, one of the projects where we had faced a problem and there was an estimating error was regarding acoustics. Acoustics is not something which is cheap, especially if you're going with the right, grade A product. It's not cheap. It's expensive. It's like 50,000 rupees a square meter. It's that kind of product. We had missed it. It was not part of our BOQ. So we need to make sure that we have this checklist, we cross-check it before we release our cost estimates. And I understand that you're not going to have all the information, but there is a project team available, and project team is expected to answer all the questions. And if not, then you can ask the client or peer and take a judgmental call about how much this is required or not. Similarly, in building services, DBRs, whether we have AHUs, what is the battery limits, whether we have BMS or not, as I said, as part of my cost driver. So all this is the estimate checklist you need to prepare and keep it with you so that you have information available when you finally cross sign the estimate and issue to the client. Once you do all this, once you prepare your estimates in the required template with the required checklist done, you will need to prepare a report. Your report should be self-explanatory, and it should be sort of, which talks completely about the project. This is just an index for your information. Uh, not sure whether you'll be able to read this properly, but it basically talks about what is the basis of cost plan, when was this project priced at, what are the exclusions, what are the inclusions, what is the project program, what kind of procurement method has been considered, what costs are included in what heads, and the summary level with all other backups, right? So this is a template of a cost report which you must issue, because anyone who's looking at the cost plan will not understand how you have derived this. What is your thought process? But in cost report, you can put down everything what you know, and that's one of the safeguard method PQS would use. That okay, this is what the costs are. This is the basis of it. If that basis change, then obviously there'll be a change in cost. So until as you issue that, it's not going to be proper. Yeah. So this is the sort of cost report you need to issue. When you issue your cost report, the first question client would think and ask is, how does my project reflect with other projects of similar types, right? It's not so simple and it's not so easy to answer that question because each project is unique. There are similar components and items, but it is not exactly same for sure, right? Every project will have their own different thought process. It could be a design, it could be the way of construction, it could be the timeline. No, this was done 5 years back. Now we are talking about 6 years. We are constructing now for another 3 years. Well, how do you normalize that? How do you make sure the change in bylaws or the local approvals which has changed is being thought about, right? So you need to make sure that when you do the benchmarking, you do the benchmarking after normalizing the existing data. Just don't normalize based on what you have, right? When you do benchmark, obviously you will have a breakdown of whether how much you're spending in structure to superstructure and all, and then you will look at the area which is the major one. Why, for example, in this project, why FFN is costing so much, right? Or why my services cost is so low. So that is what I need to consider when I'm looking at that benchmark. Ideally, it should be done along with your cost plan. So you are pretty much sure about where you're landing and why you are landing this way. What are the differences, right? It's basically add and omits on how we work. So when we do the benchmarks, we do the benchmark based on this. We look at, like say in this project, and I'll go in a bit detail here. Uh, we were given a project by client, and this was about 3.5 lakhs, 300,000, 400,000 square feet office fit out. The cost per square feet was almost about 400 rupees different. And the client wanted to know why, and this was done almost same time. When you talk about 400, 500 bucks, it's basically you're talking about 10% or 15% variance from the existing project one to another. So client asked us to look at what happened, why we are spending more here. So when we did our detailed analysis, we came out with a very interesting study, uh, and something which we didn't think that would create so much of cost variance, but it did. So we looked at the typology of floor, right? We looked at the glass facade area, because it's we need to do blinds. Blinds, if not done, my chiller capacity or my AHU capacity will change. That means my electrical capacity will change, and that will lead to my higher cost, right? Then I need to consider what landlord is providing and what landlord is not providing, right? Because based on that, my cost will change. In one project, the toilets and everything was done by owner. Another project it was not done, right? What is the internal configuration? How many meeting rooms, how many training rooms, or in the office project, that's what the cost drivers are. How many seats are being provided, and what sort of concepts have been done, open concept for ceiling or not. So while this is a post facto cost drivers, but as experienced cost managers, you are expected to learn this as a part of your own process when you do the estimate, and then understand what is going on, why this is happening this way. So this is something as a project cost driver. And I was talking about waterfall analysis earlier. In waterfall analysis, what we do is, if this was a project where we had $3,000 as a cost, we work out what are the cost drivers, and based on that, we add an omit. So based on that, if you see 3060, and my final cost for another project was 3235. However, if you see the variance and the difference, it's huge between each aspect of builder scope, or a blind, or loose furniture, or modular. Everywhere there's a huge difference. So how do you optimize? How do you make sure the client have the right cost? Client has right information available, so he can make right decision at that, right? So these are an aspect of uh, of the waterfall analysis, what you can produce to make sure that you understand internally that why the costs are different from one to another, right? So before I close it, I will take you through a parametric cost model. So allow me for a minute. I'll need to change it to Excel. Hold on. Okay. So what we have done is, just to give you more explanation about how the residential cost, for example, in this case, works. So we had broken down the whole cost plan into various kind of cost drivers. So we looked at about 50 to 60 residential projects, and then we worked out the factors. And based on our benchmarking data, we are working towards what is the real cost which will happen here, right? So, for example, it can have a different cities. It can have where the location of the project is. Okay, it can have type of project. For example, standard to premium to depends on the type of amenities, and you can have all the factors. For example, the soft rock versus hard rock. So all this will basically tell you that what kind of project we are into. So say if we have a hard rock. So when we say hard rock, if you see the cost of construction has changed, right? So I'll just go back for soil just to give you an understanding. See, so 3281 has changed to 45. So that is the basically the information which is coming in from our database, which tells us that okay, the cost of construction changes based on this cost drivers. If I go with piling, for example, or raft, my cost will change because that's a different kind of methodology which was not considered as part of benchmark, right? So all these are different options where people can work out, and based on that, an updated real-time cost information can be generated based on all the parameters what we think. So for example, right, uh, the cost of steel, whether it's a 42, no, probably we are at 38 now. So 38 will have its own different cost. Then we are talking about 250, no, we are talking about say 270 today. 270 will have its own cost impact. On cost impact will have as a cost. So if I share the, so you can see the screen here, which talks about the output. So my output will keep on changing based on all the cost drivers, which I will update. So based on all the cost drivers, what we are talking about, right? Our cost will have a differential cost. So that brings me to end of my first session on the cost plans and how do we do the cost plan benchmarking, how do we do the estimate checking, and happy to answer any questions what you have on the key cost drivers or anything. So let me know wherever you want me to start answering.
There was a question in the chat box, which I would read. from Shivaraman. What are the factors to consider for management contingency, and how much is the normal percentage for projects in terms of management contingencies?
So ROM is rough order of magnitude. That's basically order of magnitude cost plan. It's a very early one. In terms of factors which to consider for management contingency, typically we carry about 3% for the management contingency, but it depends on the level of project, the type of project, and the current client brief status. If client is very clear about what they want, then I can even drop it a little lower. But if client is not clear about what the requirements are, then it will go up. Okay, so Sushmita, the career and foresee. So Sushmita, it depends on what you would like to do. It will depend on whether you're working with a contractor or you're working with a consultant or a owner. And there are different pathways. You obviously need to get more trained under a QS who can give you more basis and understanding about how to do measurements, how to make sure the bills are being checked properly, what kind of documentation to be checked when you do the tendering. So all that you need to think about. But as I said, and my father used to say that civil engineer does not sleep empty, right? I mean, there's enough work, then there will always be enough work for good guys in construction. So I'm sure that you will do well. Prashant, waterfall analysis is basically it's a funnel. It's a funnel analysis what we work out when we compare one project to another. So that, okay, if your project is say 3,000 rupees a square feet and another project is 4,000 rupees. So based on that, how does that change has happened? That can be done even within the versions of your project. For example, when you do a concept stage estimate, and now you have done a schematic stage estimate, there'll be change. So client would like to know what changes are done and how they are done. So if you do a waterfall kind of analysis, it becomes easier for you to explain that, okay, I had considered 100 rupees a square feet for say toilets, but now we are spending 150 rupees because the cost of tile has changed from 50 rupees to 80 rupees. Just to give you example like that. Now that kind of information, if you provide, the client would like to understand that kind of details so he can make right decisions. Yeah. Runali, you can ask question or you can type here. Either ways is fine.
I think Runali, you should come forward because you should have that practice of interacting.
Good evening all.
And please, Runali, please make sure your video is enabled.
Okay.
I request everybody to please enable your video so that the interactions become easier, and also that gives you the courage. When you start interacting, it gives you a lot of courage to come forward.
Sure. Actually, Vishal, sir, my question is what percentage we are actually considering while doing the cost planning analysis? The activities which are incurred due to changes in design while the construction is in progress or while the construction is going on.
So if you as type of contingency what we carry, we have a site contingency, we have design contingency. So based on the changes which can come through, it will part of that budget. Now, what way and how it will change, it's anyone's guess. No, if client would like to revise their design, or because he is looking for a better product, or he's thinking that he's going to get a better money or better revenue out of that change, then he would like to spend that money, right? So it depends on what is your base client brief, what is to be considered, and from that what we take care in the design development process. To carry that, you will obviously carry, depending on stage to stage, it could be as high as 10% at the order of magnitude level to as low as 3.5 to 4% at the DD stage. And that is your design contingencies, and site contingencies separate. That I would typically keep only towards the substructure package, where I would foresee more problems on site. On superstructure, I don't carry typically the contingency for the site management as such.
Yeah, Vinodini.
Hello,
It's
sir.
your
Am I
turn.
on?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, sir. Hi, Vishal, sir. I'm an undergraduate from Chennai. So I have this question. There's a lot of planning which goes into costing before the construction starts. But there might occur some events like black swan events where you don't have control over that. So how do you manage, especially like situations like COVID? We never expected to have one. So how are the
Yeah,
companies managing?
yeah. So COVID is a completely abnormal. No one around the world could have predicted that the whole world will have a stop for 4 months, and will have shutdown and a government induced shutdown like this. So that's a completely, once in a generation kind of moment, and that is not something you can plan for. That is something you can react to. There will be cost impact, yes. There will be claims, yes, for sure. How do you manage and mitigate that? That is the task what the quantity surveyors would need to manage to make sure there's a fair payment which goes to the contractor. It's not that the contractor should be suffering or client should suffer. As a QS, as a third party, it's your job to make sure you have the right element. In terms of, how do we allocate for unforeseens? Uh, the approach what we typically would like to have is a first time right approach. The information and the knowledge what the quantity surveyor carries from the previous projects or from the database what they have, that's very powerful tool. You put that along with your cost drivers, you will have a huge way to look for the cost, and that will help you to mitigate your cost increases or show it to the client that okay, this is what the cost is today. Based on this are the base my assumptions and my basis of my cost. If you change from this to this will have impact. Client would know, and I mean most of clients I have worked with, they know that there is a change and they expect that change. However, they want us to inform them in on time. As long as you inform them in time so that they are not spending time in revisionist designs or going through again and again, they are okay. You need to come forward and explain the case. Okay, this is what the situation is, this is what the basis of estimate is, this is what we are now, and uh, these are the mitigation measures what you can do to reduce that cost or the impact, right? As long as you have a question and the answer, then you're good.
Can I add
Vinod,
on it? Can I add
yeah.
on it? Can this COVID? No one might have allocated the contingencies for the COVID, right? No contractor might have allocated any contingencies for the COVID, as you said. But can, if it is escalated as a claim or arbitration purpose, can we consider COVID as under a force majeure clauses? Is it can be? What is your opinion?
So we have few situations around COVID and where the claims are being discussed. Uh, the the information from the legal side, what they have told us so far is, because this is going to go into litigation, there's no standard answer because there's unprecedented situation. So any of the contract book does not have that. Uh, if I go with a fair play FIDIC, I have to compensate for any force measure to the contractor, right? If I go fair play FIDIC, which is not the case in most of the Indian contract. Indian contract are bespoke, which is more or less towards client, and in that only the time extensions are being provided and nothing related to cost, right? So it depends on the contract book and the form of contract what you have, and what does it reflect to. If you talk about from the Indian Contract Act, it does not provide you any other cost compensation. It only talks about time compensation. So if I go from that perspective, it's only time extension I'm providing. But as I see it, the clients are also understanding the contractors' issues, and there are, obviously you're going to sit down across the table and close it out. That's the only way you can take care of this kind of events. But when you look at government, it becomes more difficult because it's a government contract. And so when the government comes with a policy, probably it will be a right answer to provide. As of now, in most of wherever the legal opinions have been taken, they've been asked to take only the time extension, not the cost extensions.
Dino Mani, that's your turn.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes.
Yes, Dino, go ahead.
Very good evening, sir, and very informative session. Actually, sir, I am working for a government organization. So basically, we are doing estimation based on MESSR, then DSR, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So for a competitive world, it's very difficult. Actually, I think you may be knowing.
Yeah.
So any common platform for taking estimate. Otherwise, we need to go for quotation, then rate analysis like that. It's a lengthy procedure. So any common platforms, sir?
So I mean, I'll be honest to you. We don't work too much with the government. We have done few projects with the government, with CPWD, or where we had used DSR or a SOR kind of rates. The problem what happens is whenever there's a change in specification, you need to prove it that there's a change in specification from the DSR, and you need to ask for that the revised rate analysis, and you need to get 3 quotes minimum from the suppliers, and that's a process. Unfortunately, that is what the situation is right now, and you need to have your supply chain ready for this kind of situation. But unfortunately, there are few apps which have come up which does give you rate analysis quick, but the department will not allow you to provide that. Department obviously wants a signed stamped document to submit to them.
Right,
No.
right.
So until unless the department change their own process, this is not going to change.
Thank you, sir.
I would also like to add to it, basically for every project, it is always better to do it, by your own rather than depending on a software. As we discussed during the previous course, the forensic structural engineering. So we all should know the basics of it. See, it's all built upon the basic of. If you look at the whole presentation that Mr. Vishal has given here, you have seen the breakups. The breakups are actually arrived by the actual analysis, and you need to sometime, one time or the other, you have to go back and see the analysis. And as yesterday we have, as we all say, in fact, every project is unique. So every project will have its own challenges. For example, if you look at the piling site, a project site, wherein the soil is really bad, the soil is a black cotton soil or clay, marine clay or something like that. The piling, we need to have a different provision for extra piles, which we normally sometimes we may not foresee the need of extra piles, because it can be there can be caving, there can be a male female kind of a pile, and there can be failures. So we have to have different provisions for different projects. Every project is unique. So always, actually, even my suggestion is always you have good knowledge in the basic estimation, and make it a practice that you do it on a regular basis.
Okay, sir.
Anybody else?
Right. So I think Abhishek had a question which we missed.
Yeah.
So Abhishek has asked about precast. So Abhishek, precast costs what we know, and there are various ways and various elements. If you're talking about a completely precast like Katera, now that cost is higher than cast in situ, because they are obviously loading their infrastructure cost and non-reputation and all. So that cost, as we have seen, is a higher cost. However, you also need to consider early completion for the project and the reduction in the finance cost or reduction in the overheads. So when you look at or make a decision, you need to consider where you're going to reduce, where you're going to increase. So what happens on the overall project cost can be considered based on that. Yeah. And to answer your question, yes, in MEP, in precast, MEP, elevation, everything needs to be frozen. Agreed. The same way, if you are doing a proper concrete building, also you need to try to finish up all your MEP and elevation, because when you're talking about your openings and your shuttering, if you have your MEP drawings closed out, then only you can do it properly. Otherwise, you need to do the core cutting, or you need to put lots of sleeves around it, which is counterproductive to you. So design management needs to be done as it is in any case.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
In India, we are using all CPWD standards as the specification text. But when you do projects for an international client like Capgemini and Goldman Sachs, they are insisting on the CSI, Construction Specification Institute specs to be used thoroughly because that is the language they understand. They don't trust the Indian specifications. So in the process, what happens normally, what I encountered, particularly in items like structural glazing, if you see the CSI specification, it calls for a lot of tests and a lot of standards, ASTM standards it's talking. But in the Indian scenario, when it goes to site, we don't conduct all that kind of test and the test environment we are not creating. But if you read line by line in the specification, it calls for a very high specification. So normally contractor factors for all this high specification, but when you go to the ground, it is not conducted in the way the spec calls for. So there is a cost element involved in it. Have you ever tried to downsize the specification to Indian practices so that the overall project cost comes down?
Right. So typically, what we have come across is we ask the design team to provide the technical and performance specifications. It is their responsibility to provide the specification as per the local conditions. So we do review their specifications. So typically, our project will not have ASTMs. Our project will have the standards which is referred. However, there are places where we still need to refer BS, British standards, or a ASTM. We do need to because India has not come out with those standards yet. So we have to carry forward that. We take care in terms of when we look for the performance specifications or the testing of that. We tell that you don't need to carry out this testing only for this project. If your product manufacturer has already done a test, then it is fine. You know, we can take care of that. The design consultant can review that. However, I agree that this is a big lacuna in Indian construction, where the technical specifications are not proper. Most of times, design consultant will just give you a cut, copy, paste job from one project to another, and that is not the way a Western world has seen the technical specification written. It has to be customized. It has to be project driven. It has to take care of all the project requirements, which is not the case what we see in India. So I agree, Siva, over there, that's a big issue which needs to be taken care.
I will add on it. I face the recent problem in the specification. Like if you talk about PP valves, which you used in India, and UPVC valves for the fittings and all, the specification is there is a 3 mm differences. That if you're buying a valve or flanges, the in BS standards or ASM standards is 60 mm or 30 mm, but it is India, it's 2 mm more or 3 mm more. So it will not fit. There's a difference. Yeah. We always face. We cannot import material from India because it's all works with the higher standards. 3 mm more. It will not fit into your flanges or pipes when you bought it from India. But in America or UK, you can buy it from there. So Indians, they will not mold it because it's Indian standards will not allow for a 3 mm difference. How you will make a mold and make it? So you have to be competitive. You have to go with the Western. I mean, all over the world to standardize it. Higher standards always go with the 3 mm difference in the flanges.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. So technical specs is a place which needs to be taken care, and I think it's a high time the industry looks at that.
Anybody else? MC George has asked how contingency is assessed in a project. Please give an example.
So I'm not clear about the question. I'll try to answer. So how do we take care of contingencies? We need to consider what are the unknowns for the project or what could have a potential for change. So as we were talking about the cost drivers, what are the changes which could happen on that particular project? That it is still a professional and judgmental call. It is, but you need to work it out based on the trade packages, understand which project has a more impact and why it would have an impact. And based on that, you can work out a contingency. So for example, you're doing a let's say you are taking a commercial project, okay, 300 crore commercial project in Pune. You have a nala on one side of the property. You have a sloping ground, which has, you know, from one side to another, which is sloping by 3 meters. Okay, and you have a very longitudinal. I mean, it's a kind of a bar kind of building. Okay, it's not a square, but it's a bar. In this kind of project, my facade area will increase compared to my standard other project. So any change which happens on my facade package, if I go with a higher kind of specification for my glass or a glazing system, which will create a higher cost impact. So I need to assess a higher cost or a contingency on that element compared to anything else. I also need to consider if I have a nala there, which is a water body, and there's a river on the back, that means there could be a potential dewatering issue and there could be a piling issue. And the construction methodology and the timeline will change. So I need to assess and provide a higher contingency on those package rather than rather than in the structure. In structure, I will not need to provide too much, especially when it's a superstructure. But on the basement and the excavation, I need to consider the dewatering, I need to consider the piling. And if it's not shown in the design right now, that means that I need to allocate some funds for that. So that will be part of my contingency. MC George, I hope I am able to answer that question. If not, please ask again.
Thank you very much for the answer. Nice answer. But this will, by the projects when it starts, it will go on changing the contingencies, right? Because
yes, it will change. So contingency basically amount will differ. So the trade package amount will shift. For example, once you are done with the structure and you have a pretty good solution, then you are transferring that contingency. You are reducing that contingency as well. But if you have some more buffer left, then you are putting into interiors or a facade or any other packages which are not yet done or not yet detailed.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, hello. Hi, Vishal. So I have a question that does cost analysis also includes the cost which are happening due to changes in the value engineering while doing the value engineering in a project? If yes, then what are the percentage are we considering a fixed percentage for these changes which are occurring while value engineering, or do we have a variable range for it?
Okay, so value engineering is a thought process. It's basically we are trying to optimize. We are looking at the function and we are looking at that function, making sure that function is correct. Or can be, I think Kashi sir would have spoken about this in last 2 sessions, but we are looking at that. So when we are talking about value management here and part of cost management or cost planning, we obviously look at the options, and it is not limited to any percentages and all. For example, when I look at the cost plan and in terms of value engineering, I will look at whether my floor to floor height, do I have too much buffer? Can I reduce my floor to floor height? Right? Because if I reduce my floor to floor height, my facade will go down, my finishing will go down, all my vertical element reduces. Right? So typically what happens is when you do a air conditioning building, right, you need to carry all your utilities below your deck, below your roof deck. So at times the design team would like to keep larger buffer, 600 mm or 900 mm or more. So it's a QS job to just check whether that is adequate or can we optimize over that. So this is not a percentage or a target. It's basically looking at the function and looking at things and see whether what value as a professional can you add to the whole process that the project could have a better solution. I'll give you another example. We are currently doing a project in Pune, right? And Pune, as I said earlier, they have a large parking requirements. Now, in this project, I had a 4 basement. It was a very small building. It's only 1.5 lakh square feet, right? 150,000 square feet. And my parking itself is 50% of that area. And as per bylaws, I had to provide 4 basement. Now, instead of going 4 basement, we spoke with the design team and said, okay, can we look at only 2 basement or a single basement? Can we take the remaining parking on the top of the building as part of a podium? Can we put car lifts? No, take care of from that. And actually it worked. That solution has worked, and we are doing that building in that way. So instead of doing a 4 basement and spending time in excavation, I rather do it on ground, right? So that kind of thought process is also value engineering. It's basically looking at the options, what can be done. So when we do the cost plans, we come out with this kind of options. Yeah. So no, that kind of thought process needs to be there for sure.
May I, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Sir, there was a gentleman who was talking with the government departments, and how do you do the cost analysis? Only one thing is very important. In the garb of being the lowest bidder in competitive bidding, we should not end up in compromising the quality aspects and the other technical issues. So that should be the benchmark. If someone is, no one works for no profit. Everyone has to have that share of profit when he's taking a contract. So in the garb of being the lowest bidder and trying to, get a project, one should not compromise on these important issues. That is what I wanted to tell him. That is what I wanted to tell him, that is all.
Right. Sure. Thank you, Himanshu. So I think we should call it a day now. Thank you, Vishal. Thank you for this wonderful session. I hope everybody has got a lot of information from this lecture. Right from the beginning till the end, there was a lot of points that we have to, keep for ourselves, for our future projects and all our future ventures. And on behalf of Institution of Engineers and our India Kochi Local Center and Construction Philosophy Magazine, and on behalf of all the participants, I would like to thank you for this wonderful session. So we are very eager to hear you tomorrow again, same time. And I thank you, Kashi sir, for being here. It was actually a blessing. Your presence is always a blessing for us. Thank you so much, Kashi sir. And
as well.
Yes, and Sini Naushad is also here. Thank you, Sini, for being here. Thanks to all the participants for your wonderful participation. And please be more attentive and more participant, so that you can share your views. And we also have a lot to learn from you. I see a lot of professionals, experienced professionals in this group. Last time there was scholars also. This time also, I believe there are a few of them. So please, all of you, please come forward when you get this opportunity to interact with professionals like Kashi sir or Vishal Shah or Sini Naushad. You should use this opportunity positively. So thank you so much. So see you tomorrow. Good night to all. Good day, Kashi sir.